They looked down on the gentleman in simple clothes, and he came back with the lawyer to sign the purchase. Walter Jenkins felt his heart tighten when the young woman at the reception looked at his clothes with contempt. He was there just to fulfill an old dream, but the way he was treated made his hands tremble with contained anger. It was when she said he should look somewhere else that this store didn't sell to just anyone. Walter tried to explain that he had money, that he just wanted to see the available models, but the young woman was already calling the manager. "Mr. Peterson, there's a gentleman here who doesn't want to leave," she said loudly, making other customers turn to look. The manager arrived with firm steps, adjusting his expensive blazer while looking Walter up and down. His eyes stopped on the old boots, the faded pants, the worn-out shirt the gentleman was wearing. "Are you lost?" The manager's voice dripped with irony. "This is a store for fine furniture. Our products cost several months' salary." "I know how much they cost," Walter replied, keeping his voice firm despite the humiliation. "I came to see the dining room set I saw in the advertisement." The manager let out a dry laugh. "That set costs $5,000, sir, in cash. I'm sure you don't have that kind of money in your pocket." Other customers began to move away, as if Walter's mere presence would contaminate them. A lady in elegant clothes murmured something about security. The manager gestured for 2 security guards to approach. "I'm not leaving," Walter said, planting his feet on the ground. "I'm a customer like any other." "A customer needs to have money," the manager retorted, "and by the looks of it you barely have enough to eat. Now please leave before I call the police car." The receptionist already had the phone in her hand. Walter felt his blood boil, but he knew that if he reacted, it would give those people a reason. He took a deep breath, looked around, memorizing every detail of the store, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he stopped and turned around. "I'll be back," was all he said, but there was a firmness in those words that made the manager laugh again. Of course, come back when you have the money in your pocket," Brian mocked, already turning his attention to a well-dressed couple that had just entered. Walter crossed the street on shaky legs. At 73 years old, he had faced many things in life, but that humiliation cut deep. He had worked 50 years as a carpenter, waking up at 4 in the morning, coming home with calloused hands and an aching body. He had saved every penny, lived a simple life, and now had enough money to fulfill his dream of buying new furniture for his house. The house where he had raised his 3 children alone, after his wife passed away when the youngest was only 2. The same house where his daughter Jennifer now lived with his grandchildren, helping her father, who was beginning to feel the weight of his age. Walter wanted to surprise her with new furniture, especially a beautiful dining room set where they could gather the family on Sundays. He sat on a bench in the park across from the store, trying to calm his racing heart. He took out of his pocket the yellowed envelope where he kept clippings of furniture advertisements he had collected for months. That dining room set was perfect. Fine wood, 6 upholstered chairs, carved details that reminded him of the work he himself did when he was young. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. "Dad?" Jennifer's startled voice pulled Walter from his thoughts. "What are you doing here?" He looked up and saw his daughter with a shopping bag, accompanied by their neighbor, Mrs. Wilson. Walter tried to smile, but Jennifer knew that look well. She sat down beside him. "Something happened." It wasn't a question. "You have that same look as when you lost the city contract. It's nothing, sweetheart." "Dad," Jennifer held the old man's rough hand. "Tell me." And Walter told her. He told her about his dream of buying new furniture, about having secretly saved another $5,000 to give everyone this surprise, about the humiliation in the store. Jennifer felt the tears burning in her eyes as she listened, and Mrs. Wilson shook her head indignantly. "This is absurd," Mrs. Wilson muttered. "People who think money is everything in this life. Your father is a hard-working, honest man. Let it go." Walter stood up. "I'll look for another store." But Jennifer wouldn't let it go. That very night she called her older brother, Michael, who lived in New York. A lawyer who had graduated through sacrifice, supported by the hard work of his father who sold furniture he made himself. Michael had left everything behind to study law when Walter sold the small woodworking shop to pay for his son's college. "They did what?" Michael's voice thundered over the phone. "They humiliated our father, Mike. Treated him like he was a nobody." On the other end of the line, Michael clenched his fists. He remembered all the times he saw his father come home exhausted, his hands bruised but always with a smile for his children. He remembered the nights Walter stayed awake doing calculations, trying to make the money stretch for everything. He remembered the day his father sold the woodworking shop, the dream of a lifetime so his son could have a better future. "I'll be there tomorrow," Michael said, "and we'll fix this." "Mike, you don't have to. Dad doesn't even want to think about it anymore." "It's not about the furniture, Jen, it's about dignity." Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the store receptionist Rebecca arrived home and collapsed onto the sofa. The scene from the afternoon wouldn't leave her head. She was 28 years old, had worked at that store for 3 years, and lately had been questioning a lot of things. The way the manager, Brian, treated simpler customers had always bothered her, but she needed the job. She was a single mother to a 5-year-old boy, and the salary paid the bills. But today was different. There was something in that old man's eyes, a deep sadness that made her feel ashamed. She remembered her own father, who also wore simple clothes and had hands calloused from so much work. If someone treated her father that way, she would never forgive them. She picked up the phone, hesitant. Should she really do this? She could lose her job. But her conscience was heavy. She dialed the store's customer service number, the one that was theoretically for complaints, but which in practice never led to anything because Brian had influence with the owners. "I want to file a report," she said, her voice trembling. Today there was discrimination against a customer at the Oak Avenue store. The next day Michael arrived in his hometown. Walter was surprised to see his son at the door so early, wearing a suit and tie, carrying a briefcase of documents. "Son, you didn't have to come. I'm sure you have important work back in New York." "There is no work more important than my father's dignity." Michael hugged Walter. "Now tell me everything, down to the smallest detail." Sitting at the kitchen table, the same old table where Michael had studied throughout his entire childhood, Walter recounted every second of the humiliation. Michael wrote everything down, his expression growing more and more serious. "Dad, do you have any witnesses? There were about 4 or 5 other customers in the store, but I don't think any of them will want to get involved." "And employees?" "The young lady at reception and the manager. There were some security guards too." Michael thought for a moment. "Dad, do you really want to buy that furniture? Is it important?" "It was a dream," Walter sighed. "But now I don't know anymore. I never want to go back to that place again. What if I told you there's a way for you to get your furniture and still teach those people a lesson?" Walter looked at his son suspiciously. "What way?" "First, I need to know one thing. How much money do you really have saved up?" Walter hesitated. He had never told his children about his savings, afraid they would worry or try to convince him to spend it on other things. But Michael was a lawyer. He was smart, and Walter trusted him. "I have $50,000, he confessed in a low voice. Michael almost fell off his chair. 50,000? Dad, how? "I worked my whole life, son. I never spent on foolish things. The house is paid for. I inherited it from your grandfather. I saved penny by penny. When I sold the woodworking shop to pay for your college, I kept half the money. I kept working, doing odd jobs, fixing furniture. I never stopped." Michael felt a lump in his throat. His father had sacrificed so much, saved so much, and yet he was treated like a beggar. "Dad, with that money you could do a lot more than just buy furniture." "What kind of thing?" Michael smiled. "You could buy the store." Walter's eyes widened. "Buy the store? Son, have you been drinking?" "I'm serious. I'll look into it. If that store is for sale, or if the owners are interested in selling, you have the capital for it. But I don't know anything about selling furniture in a fancy store." "You don't need to. You'll hire people who do. And you'll get to choose how customers are treated." The idea was absurd, but at the same time it made a certain sense. Walter had never thought about having a business again. But maybe it was time to use all that saved money for something bigger than just new furniture. "I'll think about it," was all he said. Michael knew that when his father said he'd think about it, it meant he was already seriously considering it. He spent the rest of the day making calls, investigating. He found out that the Elegance and Style store belonged to two partners, Richard and Patricia Sullivan, who also owned two other stores in the city. The store where Walter had been humiliated was the smallest of them, and there were rumors that the owners wanted to sell it to focus on the others. But Michael discovered something more interesting. Rebecca, the receptionist, had filed a complaint, and it wasn't the first one. In the last 2 years, 3 similar complaints had been filed against Brian, the manager. All of them were filed away, all of them ignored. Brian was a cousin of Patricia, one of the owners, and had free rein to act as he pleased. There was a pattern. Brian discriminated against customers based on their appearance. If the person wasn't well dressed, they received cold treatment. Sometimes they were even kicked out. And he always got away with it because the owners turned a blind eye. Michael put together a dossier. He got copies of the complaints, discreetly spoke with former employees, who confirmed Brian's behavior. A former saleswoman said she was fired precisely for treating a simple customer well, who in the end paid in full for an entire living room set. Brian was furious because she didn't know how to identify that the customer wasn't the store's profile, even though he had made a purchase. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Michael scheduled a meeting with Richard Sullivan, one of the owners. He didn't mention the incident with his father. He introduced himself only as a lawyer interested in talking about the store on Oak Avenue. Richard received him in his office, curious. "A lawyer wanting to talk about the store? Do we have some legal problem?" "Not exactly." Michael opened his briefcase. "I have a client interested in making a purchase offer." Richard straightened up in his chair. "The store isn't officially for sale, but I've heard you're considering getting rid of it." Richard hesitated. It was true. The store on Oak Avenue had been losing money for 6 months. The other 2 stores were doing well, but that one was bleeding money. He and Patricia had been discussing the possibility of selling it or closing it. "We might be open to offers," he admitted cautiously. "It depends on the amount. My client is prepared to make a cash offer. But first, I need to know if there are any problems with the store. Labor lawsuits, complaints, that sort of thing." "The store is in order," Richard answered too quickly. Michael placed the copies of the complaints on the table. "Then can you explain this to me?" Richard paled when he saw the documents. He picked them up with trembling hands, reading quickly. That was investigated. Nothing was proven." "Because you didn't want to prove it," Michael retorted. "The manager is related to the partner, but that doesn't change the fact that there is a documented pattern of discrimination. What do you want? Justice and a business proposal?" Michael laid his cards on the table. He told him about his father, about the humiliation, about everything. Richard listened with an increasingly uncomfortable expression. He didn't know about that specific incident, but it didn't surprise him. Brian had always been problematic, but Patricia insisted on keeping him because he was family. "My client has the capital to buy the store outright," Michael continued, "but only if certain conditions are met." "What conditions?" "First, the entire history of complaints against Brian comes with the sale. My client will take over knowing all the problems. Second, Brian is fired before the sale is finalized. Third, my client will have total freedom to restructure the store as he sees fit," Richard thought. The store was losing money. Patricia would be angry about firing her cousin, but they would get cash, and they would have no more headaches. "How much is your client willing to pay?" $75,000, Michael said, knowing he was offering above market value. Richard almost choked. That store was worth at most $60,000, and the buyer would pay cash. "I need to speak with my partner." "Of course, but if we have a deal, I want the signing to take place at the store itself," my client insists. "Why? Let's just say he wants to close a cycle in the same place where it began." Richard nodded. still processing everything. I'll have an answer in 2 days. Michael left the office and went straight to his father's house. Walter was in the garage, fixing an old chair. Even with money saved, he couldn't stay still. So? He asked anxiously. The owner is interested. But Dad, there's something I need to tell you. The store is worth less than I thought. I offered $75,000 to make sure they accept. Walter put down the sandpaper and looked at his son. That's more than half of what I have saved. I know. But we can negotiate a lower price. I just offered high to have some room. Walter paced in circles, thinking, this was crazy. Buying a furniture store at 73, spending his life savings on a business he didn't even know would work. You know what? He said finally. Let's go ahead. Dad, are you sure? I worked 50 years to have this money. I always thought I'd leave it to you three. But you know what I found out? You don't need it. Michael, you're a successful lawyer. Jennifer is a tenured teacher. Robert has his own auto repair shop. You've made your own way. Maybe it's time for me to use this money for something that makes a difference. Michael hugged his father, moved. You're going to show those people who Walter Jenkins is. For the next 2 days, the city seemed to have stopped for Walter. He barely slept, running through all the possibilities in his head. What if the sale didn't happen? What if it did happen and he lost all his money? What if he didn't know how to run the store? Jennifer noticed her father's anguish. Dad, you don't have to do this. We can forget what happened. No, daughter, it's not just for me. It's for all the people who are treated like I was. How many times do you think that happened in that store? Jennifer had no answer. On the second day, Michael received the call. Richard accepted the proposal, but with a counter-offer of $70,000. Michael agreed immediately. Brian would be fired that same week, and the contract signing would take place at the store, as Walter had requested. There was, however, one condition from Patricia. She wanted to meet the buyer before the signing. She wanted to be sure it wasn't some competitor trying to destroy the Sullivan family's reputation. Michael agreed and scheduled a meeting for the next day. Walter spent the night choosing his clothes. Jennifer suggested he buy something new, but her father refused. I'll go in simple clothes. Let them see who I really am. On the morning of the meeting, Walter put on a pair of old but clean jeans, a faded plaid shirt, and his usual boots. Michael was in a suit, carrying the document briefcase. Father and son entered Richard and Patricia's office. Patricia looked at Walter and couldn't hide her surprise. This was the buyer, an older man in worn-out clothes? Mr. Walter? She extended her hand, more out of politeness than desire. A pleasure. Walter shook her hand firmly. They sat down. Patricia studied Walter with a suspicious look. I need to be honest, she began. I was surprised when I found out the buyer was, well, someone who looks poor. Walter finished bluntly. Patricia turned red. I didn't mean that. But it's what you're thinking. And do you know how I know? Because it's exactly what your cousin thought when I went to his store a few days ago. Patricia blinked, confused. My cousin? Brian. I was there. I wanted to buy furniture. I was thrown out like I was a beggar. Patricia's face went through several shades of red. Richard, who already knew the story, just watched. Mr. Walter, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. Because you never wanted to know. Your cousin has been discriminating against customers for years. It's all documented. Michael placed the dossier on the table, but he was always protected because he's family. Patricia flipped through the documents, her hand trembling. There were more complaints than she had imagined. Brian had always said they were just misunderstandings, difficult customers. But there it all was, in black and white, a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Witnesses, detailed accounts. I will fire him, she said, her voice choked. Today. No, Walter interrupted. You will fire him in front of all the employees. You will explain the reason. And you will apologize publicly for the behavior you allowed. Patricia swallowed hard. It was humiliating, but she knew it was fair. And after that we sell the store. After that, we sell the store, Walter confirmed. The meeting ended with the agreement that Brian's dismissal would happen the next day, and the signing of the purchase would be 1 week later, at the store itself. That night, Rebecca, the receptionist, received a call from Patricia. "Rebecca, I need you to come to the store tomorrow at 9 in the morning. I'm going to have a meeting with all the employees." Rebecca hung up with a racing heart. Had they discovered it was her who made the complaint? Was she going to be fired? How would she pay the bills? She spent the night awake, worried. The next morning, all the employees were gathered in the store. Brian was there, arms crossed, thinking it was just another routine meeting. Patricia entered accompanied by Richard, both with serious expressions. "I'm here to announce a change," Patricia began. "The Elegance and Style store on Oak Avenue has been sold." A murmur spread among the employees. "Sold? To whom?" "The new owner will take over in a week. But before that, I need to correct a mistake I made. A serious mistake." Patricia looked at Brian. "Brian, you're fired, effectively right now." Brian turned pale. "What do you mean?" "Patricia, I'm your cousin. Exactly why I should have fired you sooner. I allowed you to discriminate against customers, to embarrass people, to tarnish this company's reputation, all because you're family. I will no longer turn a blind eye. You can't fire me without just cause. I have just cause." Patricia placed the complaint file on the counter. "Years of discriminatory behavior, witnesses, documentation. You can seek your rights in court if you want, but get out of this store now." Brian looked around, searching for support, but all the employees avoided his gaze. Rebecca, in particular, kept her head down, afraid that Brian would discover she was the one who opened Pandora's box. "You'll regret this." Brian grabbed his things and left, slamming the door. Patricia took a deep breath. "I apologize to all of you who witnessed or suffered from the inappropriate behavior that was tolerated in this store. This changes now. The new owner has a different vision for the business, and I hope you give him the same dedication you gave us." The employees left the meeting still processing everything. Rebecca went to Patricia before leaving. "May I speak with you?" "Of course." "I was the one who made the complaint," she confessed, tears streaming down. "That gentleman that Brian humiliated. He reminded me of my father. I couldn't stay silent. If you want to fire me too, I understand." Patricia put her hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "I'm not going to fire you. You did the right thing. In fact, the new owner might want to speak with you. He values honest people." Rebecca nodded, still not fully understanding what was happening. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The following week was one of preparation. Michael handled all the bureaucratic parts. Walter visited the store at night when it was closed, walking through the empty aisles, imagining what it would be like to own that place. Jennifer was worried. "Dad, what if it doesn't work out? You're putting all your money into this." "Then I'll go back to work," Walter smiled. "I've worked all my life, daughter. A few more years won't kill me." "But you're at an age to rest." "Rest for what? To grow old sitting and watching television?" "No, thank you. I prefer to do something useful." Robert, the youngest son, a mechanic, came to visit them that week. When he learned of his father's plan, he was torn between admiration and worry. "Dad, are you sure about this? It's a lot of money." "Your brother has already asked me that about 10 times, Walter laughed. "And my answer is always the same. Yes, I'm sure." "But what if you need help? You understand making furniture, not selling it. That's why I'm going to hire people who understand. I've already spoken with Mrs. Wilson, the neighbor. She worked 30 years in a department store. She's going to help me get started." Robert shook his head, surprised by his father's determination. The night before the signing, Walter couldn't sleep. He got up at 3 in the morning and went to the garage. He picked up one of the chairs he was repairing and started sanding. The repetitive motion of his hands always calmed him. Jennifer found him there at 5 in the morning. "You didn't sleep, Dad?" "I'm nervous," he admitted. "Do you want to back out?" "Never. But I'm nervous all the same." Jennifer sat down beside him. You know what Mom would say if she were here? Walter stopped sanding. What? That you were always too stubborn for your own good, but that you never gave up on anything in your life, and that if you're doing this, it's because you know it's the right thing. Walter's eyes welled up. It had been so long since they talked about his wife. She had left too soon, taken by an illness the doctors didn't know how to treat. Walter had raised the children alone, and always wondered if she would be proud. Do you think she would be proud? Dad, she was always proud of you. We all are. Father and daughter stood there in silence until the sun rose. At 9 in the morning, Walter put on the same clothes he had worn on the first day. Michael tried to convince him to buy something new, but his father was unyielding. I'm going like this. Let them see that clothes don't define character. They arrived at the store at 10 o'clock, the scheduled time. Richard and Patricia were already there, accompanied by their lawyer. All the employees had been summoned to witness the signing. Rebecca was nervous. She still didn't know who the new owner was, only that he wanted to change a lot of things in the store. When the door opened and Walter walked in, Rebecca almost fainted. It was the man Brian had humiliated. She looked at Michael beside him, in a suit, briefcase in hand, and everything made sense. Walter walked to the center of the store. All the employees watched him, some confused, others beginning to understand. Patricia made the formal introductions. Walter Jenkins, the new owner of the store, elegance and style. The silence was absolute. Rebecca began to cry softly. One of the security guards who had helped throw Walter out looked at the floor, ashamed. Michael opened the briefcase and placed the documents on the glass counter, the same counter Brian had leaned on to humiliate his father. The irony was not lost on anyone. Before we sign, Walter said, his voice firm, I want to say a few things. Everyone listened in silence. I was humiliated here 2 weeks ago, treated as if I were nobody, because my clothes are simple and my hands are calloused. But these hands built a life for my 3 children. These clothes have seen 50 years of honest work, and this money I'm using to buy this store was saved penny by penny, dawn after dawn. Rebecca was sobbing now. Other employees discreetly wiped their eyes. I didn't buy this store for revenge, Walter continued. I bought it because I believe every customer deserves respect, no matter how they are dressed. I bought it because I'm going to create a place where money is important, yes, but respect is more important. Richard and Patricia listened, visibly moved. They knew they had been wrong to tolerate Brian's behavior for so long. For those who want to stay and work with me, the doors are open. But there is one condition. Treat every customer as you would like to be treated. Rich, poor, well-dressed or shabby. Everyone deserves respect. The employees began to applaud, slowly at first, then louder. Rebecca was the first to approach. Mr. Walter, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for that day. You've already redeemed yourself. Walter shook her hand. You were the one who reported it, weren't you? Rebecca's eyes widened. How did you know? My son found out, and because of that, I want to offer you the position of manager. Manager? But I'm just a receptionist. You are someone with the courage to do what's right even when it's hard. That's what I look for in a manager. Rebecca could hardly believe it. From receptionist to manager, and working for someone who valued honesty above all else. The contract signing took almost an hour. Michael explained each clause to his father, who signed each page with trembling hands. When he reached the last page, Walter stopped and looked around. The store was now his. Richard and Patricia said their goodbyes, wishing him luck. Walter shook both their hands. You built a business. You just lost your way along the journey, but I will take good care of this place. When the former owners left, Walter gathered all the employees. Now let's talk about how things will work from here on out. He spent the rest of the day listening to each one of them. He listened to the complaints, the suggestions, the fears. He wrote everything down in an old notebook he had brought from home. Mrs. Wilson arrived in the mid-afternoon to help and immediately started reorganizing things. This display window is all wrong, she muttered. You don't display expensive furniture like this. You need the right lighting, the right angle. Rebecca and the other employees watched in admiration. Mrs. Wilson might be over 70, but she understood the store like no one else. At the end of the day, when everyone had left, Walter stayed alone in the store. He walked among the furniture, touching each piece: dining room sets, sofas, dressers, bookcases. He thought about how many families would be happy with that furniture, how many stories those objects would witness. Michael came back to pick him up. "So, Dad, how does it feel to be a store owner?" "Scared," Walter laughed, "but happy, very happy." In the following days, Walter implemented changes. The first was a complete training program for all employees on respectful customer service. He brought a psychologist friend to give talks on empathy and prejudice. Some employees resisted at first, but soon realized he was serious. The second change was in the pricing. Walter wanted the store to be accessible without losing quality. He renegotiated with suppliers, secured discounts, and passed part of the savings on to the customers. The third change was the most controversial. He created a special installment plan for lower-income customers. Rebecca thought it was risky. Mrs. Wilson did too, but Walter insisted, "If the person works, if they can pay, I'll give them a chance. I won't judge by appearance." In the first few weeks, sales dropped. The old, wealthy customers didn't like the changes. They thought the store was becoming too common. Some went to shop at the competition. Walter grew worried, but he didn't back down. Jennifer saw her father lose weight and sleep less. The pressure was taking its toll. Robert offered to lend money if the store needed it, but Walter refused. "It either works the right way or it doesn't," he said. But then something began to change. New customers started to appear, simple people who had never set foot in a fine furniture store but now felt welcome. Families who were saving up to buy a living room set, a wardrobe, a bed, and they paid on time, proud of their achievement. One day, a man of nearly 80 came in, wearing flip-flops and an old shirt. The security guards exchanged glances, remembering what had happened to Walter, but Rebecca went to him immediately. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I wanted to see that sofa in the window," the man said shyly, pointing. "Of course, let me show you. And if you'd like to try it out, please feel free, that's what it's here for." The man almost cried. He had never been treated like that in a store. He ended up buying the sofa, paying in 10 installments. As he was leaving, he asked who the owner was. "It's that gentleman over there," Rebecca said, pointing to Walter, who was organizing papers in the corner. The man went up to Walter. "Sir, thank you. For 40 years I've wanted to buy a new sofa. I was always shooed away from fancy stores. Today I managed it. Because of you." Walter hugged the stranger, and they both cried right there in the middle of the store. The story began to spread. Local newspapers ran stories about the store that sold to everyone. Radio programs interviewed Walter. He told his story simply, without playing the victim, just showing that respect is priceless. And sales skyrocketed. Not just from low-income customers, but also from middle-class people, and even some wealthy ones who identified with the mission. Within 3 months, the store was turning a profit. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Brian, the former manager, started spreading rumors. He said Walter was going bankrupt, that the store was going to close. He claimed the furniture being sold was of poor quality. He tried to tarnish the business's reputation. Rebecca found out and was furious. "I'm going to sue him. That's slander." "Let it go," Walter said calmly. "A man who needs to destroy others to feel better is already destroyed inside." But Michael didn't let it slide. He sent Brian a cease and desist letter, demanding he stop the rumors or face a lawsuit. Brian backed down immediately. 4 months after the purchase, Patricia appeared at the store. Walter received her politely but coldly. The memory of how she and her husband had allowed Brian to act for so long still hurt. "I came to apologize," Patricia said, truly from the heart. "I should have done this sooner. You already apologized on the day of the sale, but not in the way I should have, Walter. I was complicit with prejudice. I let my cousin humiliate people because it was easier to ignore than to confront, and you suffered because of it." Walter studied her. He saw sincerity in her eyes. "I accept your apology, but this doesn't change what happened. I know. I just wanted you to know that I've learned. At the other 2 stores, I implemented training just like you did here. I fired 2 employees who discriminated against customers. I won't look the other way anymore." Walter nodded. "That's good. It means my humiliation at least served a greater purpose." Patricia left relieved. It didn't erase the past, but at least she could sleep better knowing she had tried to make things right. 6 months after the purchase, Walter held a meeting with all the employees. He had an important announcement. "I've decided to create a profit-sharing fund," he said. "A portion of the money the store earns will be divided among you, because the success isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who works here." The employees burst into applause. Rebecca was crying again. With that extra money, she could finally put her son in a better school. The store also began doing social work. Once a month, they donated furniture to families in need. Not old or broken furniture, but new, quality pieces. Walter made a point of delivering them personally. On one of these deliveries, he met Mrs. Thompson, a 75-year-old woman who lived in a shack. She was sick, bedridden, and the only bed she had was broken. "We're going to bring you a new bed," Walter said. "I don't have any money, son. It's free, a gift from the store." Mrs. Thompson began to cry. "Why would a stranger do this for me?" "Because everyone deserves dignity, and no one should have to sleep in a broken bed." When they arrived with the new bed, Mrs. Thompson tried to get up to thank him, but she was too weak. Walter held her hand. "No need to thank me. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." "I promise." Mrs. Thompson's story ended up in the newspaper. The reporter who covered it was so moved that she wrote a full-page article. The next day, dozens of people showed up at the store wanting to help. Cash donations, offers to deliver furniture, people wanting to volunteer. Walter had to organize everything. He created a structured donation project with clear criteria for recipients. Rebecca was put in charge of coordinating the volunteers. Mrs. Wilson organized the logistics. The store became more than a business. It turned into a meeting point, a place of solidarity. People went there not just to buy, but to talk, to be part of something bigger. Michael, who was still in New York but visited whenever he could, was proud. "Dad, you've created something special here." "I didn't do it alone, son. It was everyone together." Jennifer also got involved. She started teaching literacy classes for adults in a space that Walter provided at the back of the store. Robert set up a small workshop next door to repair donated furniture that needed fixing before being delivered. The whole family came together around the project. What had started as revenge for a humiliation had transformed into a life's purpose. 1 year after buying the store, Walter took stock. The store was profitable. The employees were happy. Hundreds of families had been helped. And he, at 74 years old, had found a new meaning in life. But there was still one loose end: Brian. Walter knew through acquaintances that the former manager was unemployed. No store wanted to hire him after the news of his dismissal spread. He was in need. Part of Walter felt a petty satisfaction about it. Justice, he thought. But another part, the part his mother had raised to be compassionate, ached seeing someone suffer. Jennifer had a clear opinion about it. "He deserves it. He humiliated so many people. Now he knows how it feels." "But has he learned?" Walter questioned. "I don't know. And frankly, I don't care." But Walter did care. Not because he liked Brian, but because he believed in second chances. He himself had received several in his life. 2 weeks later, Brian showed up at the store. Thin, unshaven, with sunken eyes. Walter saw him enter and felt a tightness in his chest. Jennifer was going to have the security guards throw him out, but Walter stopped her. "Let him come in." Brian walked up to Walter, his head bowed. "You can speak," Walter said, without hostility, but without warmth. Brian swallowed hard. "I came to apologize, for real, for what I did to you and to all the other people I treated badly." "Why now?" "Because now I know how it feels. I went looking for a job at 10, 15 stores. They all humiliated me, treated me like trash, and I understood. I understood what I did to you and to so many people." Walter studied him. He saw sincerity there, or desperation, perhaps both. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just came to apologize. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. Walter thought about his options. He could send Brian away. He could humiliate him the same way he had been humiliated. It would be fair, right? An eye for an eye. But he remembered his mother. He remembered the values he tried to pass on to his children. He remembered that revenge builds nothing. Do you have any skills, besides being an arrogant manager? Brian blinked, surprised. I know how to do accounts. I'm good with numbers. I need someone to handle the store's basic bookkeeping. It's not a management position, it's office work in the back. It pays minimum wage plus commission. Interested? Brian could hardly believe it. You're offering me a job, after everything? I'm offering you a chance, one single chance, Ghoul. If you treat any person, customer or employee with disrespect, you're out. Understood? Yes, sir, I swear I've learned. We'll see. Jennifer was furious when she found out. Dad, forgive me, but have you lost your mind? That man humiliated you. And now he's sorry. Or desperate. Maybe, but he deserves a chance to prove he's changed. Jennifer didn't agree, but she respected Walter's decision. Brian started the next day. He worked quietly, head down, doing everything he was told without complaint. It was a brutal fall, from an authoritarian manager to an office assistant. But he endured it. In the first few weeks, the other employees treated him coldly. No one had forgotten how he had been. But gradually, seeing that Brian had truly changed, some began to give him a chance. The real test came a month later. An older gentleman in torn clothes entered the store. Brian was passing through the main area when he saw him. All the employees stopped to watch his reaction. Brian walked over to the gentleman. "Good morning, can I help you with something?" The gentleman looked surprised. "I wanted to see that table." "Of course, come with me." Brian showed him the table, explained the details, offered a payment plan. The gentleman ended up not buying because the price was over his budget, but he left the store smiling. "Thank you for your help, son. I usually get shooed out of stores like this." When the gentleman left, the employees started to applaud. Brian had passed the test. Jennifer approached him. "You really have changed." "I needed to lose everything to learn," Brian said, "and I'm still learning." Walter watched from a distance, satisfied. Maybe giving second chances was risky, but it was human, and humanity was what he wanted to build in that store. Another 6 months passed. The store prospered more and more. Walter decided to open a second location in another neighborhood. Rebecca would be the manager of the original store, and he hired someone new for the second one. Life was good. His children came to visit him often. Jennifer's oldest granddaughter had just won a scholarship, and Robert's grandson had graduated as an electronics technician. The family was growing, prospering, but Walter felt something was missing. He wasn't unhappy, far from it. But there was a void. Almost 50 years living alone since his wife had passed. He had never looked for anyone, focused on raising his children and working. Now, with life more organized, the loneliness weighed on him. It was Mrs. Wilson who noticed. "Walter, you need to find some company." "Company? I have the children, the grandchildren, the employees." "That's not what I'm talking about. You need someone to share your life with, to talk to in the evening, to have coffee with in the morning." "I'm 74 years old, Betty. Who would want an old man like me?" "An old lady like you," she laughed. "I have a friend, a widow for 10 years, a good person. I think you two would get along." Walter laughed awkwardly. "I don't know about that." But Mrs. Wilson insisted, and a week later, Walter found himself in a cafe, waiting to meet Eleanor, this friend. He was as nervous as a teenager. What should he wear? What should he say? It had been so long since he'd had a date. Eleanor arrived, white hair tied in a bun, a warm smile, kind eyes. She was 71, but looked younger. She had worked her whole life as a seamstress, raising 4 children alone after being widowed. They talked for hours, about life, about loss, about new beginnings. Walter told her about the store, about the humiliation he had suffered, about turning pain into purpose. Eleanor told him about raising her children by sewing through the night, about missing her husband, a feeling that never went away, about having learned to be happy alone. "But being alone is different from being with someone," she said. "I learned to be happy alone because I had to, not because I preferred it," Walter agreed. He too had learned to live alone out of necessity, not by choice. The date ended with a promise to see each other again. And they did, many times. Coffees, lunches, walks in the square. Walter felt young again. Eleanor brought lightness to his life. Jennifer noticed the change in her father. "Dad, you're different, happier." "I met someone," Walter confessed, blushing. "That's wonderful. I want to meet her." And she did. The whole family met Eleanor, and they approved of her immediately. It was impossible not to like her. Kind, funny, full of stories. The grandchildren adored her. Michael joked, "Dad, are you getting married again?" "Married?" Walter's eyes widened. "I don't know. We're still getting to know each other." But the idea was planted. Why not? He was 74, but so what? He deserved to be happy. He deserved company. 6 months after meeting Eleanor, Walter proposed. Nothing elaborate. They were sitting on the bench in the square where they had met for the first time. Walter took her hand. "Eleanor, I know we're old. I know we've already lived a lot. But I want to live the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Eleanor cried and said yes. The wedding was simple at the local church with family and close friends. Rebecca closed the store so all the employees could attend. Even Brian was invited. At the reception, held in the store's own event space, Walter gave a speech. "2 years ago, I walked into this store as a customer and left humiliated. I could have let that destroy me, but I chose to turn pain into action. And look what happened. I have a store I'm proud of. Employees who have become family and now a wonderful wife. Life takes turns. Sometimes it knocks you down. But if you get up, you might find something better than you ever imagined." Everyone applauded. Eleanor kissed her husband, emotional. Jennifer approached her father. "Mum would be proud, Dad." "I think so, honey, I think so." Life went on. Walter and Eleanor lived together in the old house. She helped at the store, sewing small repairs on upholstery. The second store unit opened and was a success. The social project grew, helping more and more families. Brian, who had proven to be truly changed, was promoted to financial supervisor. It wasn't a manager position, he never would be again, but it was a position of trust. He treated the role with seriousness and humility. 2 years after buying the store, Walter was invited to give a lecture at an entrepreneurship conference. The theme was overcoming adversity and ethics in business. He accepted, nervously. He had never spoken in public to so many people. Michael helped him prepare. Jennifer chose his outfit. Robert arranged a car to take him. Eleanor would be in the audience for support. On the day of the lecture, Walter went up on stage, trembling. He looked at the 200 people in the audience. He took a deep breath and began. He told his story from the beginning. His work as a carpenter, raising his children alone, saving for 50 years, the humiliation at the store, the decision to buy the business, the changes he implemented, the social project, the second chance given to Brian, reuniting with love in his golden years. He spoke for 40 minutes. When he finished, the silence was absolute. Then one person started to applaud, then another. Soon the entire audience was on their feet, giving him a standing ovation. Walter left the stage in disbelief. Several people approached him afterward, wanting advice, wanting to be inspired. Successful business owners asked for tips on ethics. Young entrepreneurs asked how to start. To everyone, Walter said the same thing. Success without character isn't success, it's just money, and money without dignity is worthless. The words went viral. They ended up on social media, blogs, and news sites. Walter became a minor local celebrity, but he remained the same, humble, simple, in worn-out clothes. Rebecca suggested he buy new clothes now that he had money and fame. Walter refused. "These clothes remind me of where I came from, and I never want to forget." The store became a tourist attraction. People went there not just to shop, but to meet Walter, to hear his story. He welcomed everyone with the same smile, the same kindness. 3 years after the purchase, Walter decided to open a third store, this time in a neighboring town. And he had a special plan. He wanted the store to be managed by someone who, like him, had been discriminated against and wanted to prove their worth. He created a different selection process. Resume or experience didn't matter. Life story and character mattered. Over 100 people applied. Walter personally interviewed each one. He chose Mrs. Thompson, the same elderly lady for whom he had donated a bed 2 years prior. She had recovered from her illness, had gone back to work making home-cooked meals, and now wanted a chance to grow. She was 76 years old, but had energy to spare. "Mrs. Thompson, would you like to be the manager of the new store?" "Manager? But Mr. Jenkins, I've never worked in a store." "You'll learn. Rebecca will train you. And I'm sure you'll be great." Mrs. Thompson cried so much that Walter thought she would faint. At 76 years old, her first formal job. Her first chance to prove that age doesn't define ability. The third store opened with a celebration. Mrs. Thompson was radiant, in a new uniform, with a wide smile. She attended to customers with a grandmother's affection, and everyone loved it. The 3 stores prospered. The social project expanded. Walter created a foundation to better organize the donations. Michael handled the legal side. Jennifer coordinated the educational area. Robert maintained the repair workshop. Eleanor did the sewing. The whole family was involved. Walter was 76 years old now. He felt his body more tired, the aches of age, but his soul was at peace. He had made a difference. He had turned humiliation into purpose. He had built not just a business, but a legacy. One evening, sitting on the porch with Eleanor, he reflected, "You know, honey, if I hadn't been humiliated in that store, none of this would exist." "It's true," Eleanor held his hand. "Sometimes pain is the push we need to get to where we're supposed to be. I'm grateful, not for the humiliation, but for what it led me to do. And many people are grateful to you. Look at how many lives changed because of one decision you made." Walter thought of the hundreds of families helped, of the employees who had dignified jobs, of the customers who were treated with respect regardless of their appearance, of Brian, who got a second chance, of Mrs. Thompson, who at 76 fulfilled a dream. "It was worth it," he said simply. On the 4th anniversary of buying the store, Walter organized a party. He invited everyone who had been part of the journey. Former employees, longtime customers, families helped by the social project. The store closed for the celebration. Patricia and Richard, the former owners, also came. They had become friends with Walter, impressed by what he had done with the business. "Walter, you turned that store into something much bigger than we ever managed," Richard said. "Because you focused only on profit, I focused on people." "And you ended up profiting more than us," Patricia laughed. "Ironic, isn't it?" It was true. Walter's 3 stores had higher revenues than the 6 stores of the Sullivan Group, because loyal customers are worth more than occasional ones. And Walter had built a base of loyal customers through respect and dignity. During the party, Rebecca asked to speak. "I want to make an announcement, Mr. Jenkins. In these 4 years, I've learned more about management, ethics, and humanity than in any college. You gave me a chance when I was just a regretful receptionist. You promoted me to manager. You trusted me. And now, I want to give back." She turned to all the guests. "I'm pregnant, and if it's a boy, his name will be Walter." The party erupted in applause and cheers. Walter cried without hiding it. Eleanor hugged him, emotional. Rebecca approached and hugged them both. "You changed my life. I want my son to have the name of the man who taught me what character is." Walter could barely speak. "Rebecca, thank you. Thank you so much." The party went on late into the night. Stories were told, laughter was shared, tears were shed. Walter looked around and saw what he had built. Not just stores, but a community, a family. Brian approached him during a quiet moment. "Mr. Jenkins, I'll never be able to thank you enough for what you did for me. You thank me every day with your honest work. I have something to tell you. I met someone, a wonderful woman. She's also starting over. And it was while talking about new beginnings that I realized Everything I learned came from you. Not from me, from the consequences of your own actions. I just gave you the chance. You're the one who took it. Even so, thank you for not letting me sink." Walter squeezed Brian's shoulder. "Everyone deserves a second chance. Some need a third, a fourth. The important thing is not to give up on people." The party ended in the early hours. When everyone had left, Walter and Eleanor were alone in the empty store. They looked around at the furniture, at the photos on the wall showing happy families with their purchases, at the certificates of appreciation from institutions that had received donations. "We built something beautiful, didn't we?" Eleanor said. "We did," Walter agreed. "And it's not over yet, there's much more ahead." And there was. In the following years, Walter opened 2 more stores. He created a microcredit program for customers who wanted to start a business. He established partnerships with technical schools to train young people in carpentry and sales. He created scholarships for employees' children. The social foundation grew. Besides donating furniture, it started renovating houses for families in need. Robert coordinated the renovations. Jennifer taught financial management classes for the beneficiaries to learn how to manage resources. Michael offered free legal consultations. Mrs. Thompson, who had started as the manager of the 3rd store, became a regional supervisor. At 79 years old, she traveled between the stores guiding younger managers. She was living proof that age is no limit. Rebecca had the baby, a boy, Walter Jr. The old Walter was the godfather. He cried while holding the baby at the baptism, thinking about how life takes you on a journey. It started with humiliation and ended up with a baby named after him. Walter's stores became a national benchmark. Business owners from other states came to visit to learn the business model. Universities invited him to give lectures. They wrote academic articles about his people-centered management. But Walter remained the same. He woke up early, went to the store, talked with employees and customers. He wore the same simple clothes. He lived in the same house. The only difference was that now he had Eleanor by his side. At 80 years old, Walter decided to semi-retire. He handed over the management of the stores to Rebecca, keeping only an advisory role. He wanted to travel with Eleanor, to see places he had always dreamed of. He wanted to spend more time with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. At the farewell party, all the employees from all the stores were present, more than 200 people. Walter stepped onto a small stage set up in the original store, the same one where it all began. "When I first walked in here, I was treated like trash. Today I leave behind a family, not by blood, but by heart. You are my greatest achievement. Not the stores, not the money, not the fame. You, every single person here who learned that respect, is worth more than profit. That dignity has no price. That every human being deserves to be treated with kindness no matter their appearance." He paused, emotional. "I was humiliated here, and I turned that humiliation into love, into respect, into opportunity. If there's one thing I want to leave as a legacy, it's this. Turn pain into purpose. Use what hurts you to build, not to destroy. And never, ever judge someone by their appearance. Because behind worn-out clothes, there might be a heart of gold." The ovation was deafening. Walter stepped down from the stage and was hugged by dozens of people. Employees, customers, beneficiaries of the social project. Everyone wanted to thank him, say goodbye, wish him happiness. Brian was one of the last. "Mr. Walter, I'm going to miss you. I'm not going far. I'm just going to travel a bit. I'll be back often to visit. Even so, you saved me, and I will never forget." Walter hugged Brian. Who would have thought the man who had humiliated him would become a friend? Life really was full of twists and turns. Walter and Eleanor traveled. They saw beaches, mountains, historic cities. They did everything they never had time to do before. But they always came back. Because home was there, in that town, in that community they helped transform. At 83 years old, Walter received a special invitation. The city wanted to honor him with the key to the city. The ceremony would be at Lincoln Center with a live broadcast. Walter tried to refuse. "I didn't do anything special. I just treated people with respect. Exactly, the mayor said. In a time where that is rare, you made it your mission. You deserve the recognition. On the night of the ceremony, the center was packed. Authorities, business owners, families who had been helped, employees, friends. Everyone was there to honor Walter. Speeches were made. Videos were shown highlighting the impact of the stores and the foundation. Hundreds of families with renovated homes, young people who graduated from technical courses, small business owners who got their start with the credit program. When it was Walter's turn to speak, he walked onto the stage with difficulty. His legs weren't what they used to be. But his voice was firm. I thank you for this honor, but I need to be honest. I didn't do anything alone. Every achievement here was made by many hands. My children who supported me, my wife who stands by me, employees who embraced the vision, clients who trusted us, partners who believed. All of you are part of this. He pointed to Michael in the audience. My son who taught me that the law can be a tool for justice. For Jennifer. My daughter who showed me that education transforms. For Robert. My son who proved that manual labor has dignity. For Eleanor. My wife who taught me it's never too late to love. For Rebecca. The woman who had the courage to do the right thing, even when afraid. For Brian. The man who proved that people can change. For Mrs. Thompson. The lady who showed that age does not define ability. His voice choked up. And for all of you here, every person who was treated with respect in the store, every family that received help, every young person who got an opportunity, you are the reason for everything. You are the true prize. The audience erupted. Many were crying. Walter received the honorary plaque with trembling hands. He looked at the object of metal and glass. Beautiful, no doubt. But he knew the true prize wasn't that. It was the love he felt in the room. It was knowing he made a difference. After the ceremony, a young reporter approached him for an interview. Mr. Jenkins, if you could go back in time, would you change anything? Walter thought. I wouldn't change the humiliation I suffered, because it was that which brought me here. I would change perhaps my initial reaction. I was angry. I wanted revenge. But I soon realized that revenge builds nothing. So I turned my anger into positive action, and I would do that from the very first second if I could go back. What would you say to someone going through a similar humiliation? I would say it hurts, that it's unfair, that you have a right to feel angry. But don't let the anger consume you. Use it as fuel to do something greater. Show your worth not by proving they were wrong, but by building something that benefits others going through the same thing. Turn pain into a legacy. The interview went viral. Millions of views. Emotional comments from people who identified with it. Walter became a symbol of overcoming through kindness. End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Do you think Walter did the right thing by giving Brian a second chance? And did his decision to turn humiliation into an opportunity to help others inspire you? Leave your opinion in the comments. We really want to know what you think. Don't forget to like this video and, very importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.